Week 2 of the live show is here. Lettermen Live with Andy Backstrom, with Spencer Holbrook. It is Lettermen Live presented by Wendys. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but Andy, have you had them covered in sauce?
Not yet. I need to.
Well, let me tell you, Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs that you love and turn them up not just to 10, to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker like Andy Backstrom, try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Spicy ghost pepper on spicy nugs. I dare you to try it, Andy. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. And for a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Andy, week 1, we finally made it. We're finally here. How you feeling?
Feels like it's been the longest offseason ever, also the most eventful offseason ever. A lot of NIL money, a lot of transfers, returners, and now we get to Akron week 1, and it feels like I wish we could get to the bigger games quicker. You know, last year you opened Big Ten play week 1 against Indiana on the road. The year before that, Ohio State played Notre Dame in a primetime game. It feels like there should be a bigger game this weekend, but it's Akron, and we're happy to have football back. But, man, it's felt like a long offseason.
It certainly has. Ohio State fans, if you have a question, put it down in the comments. We'll try to answer it to the best of our abilities here. It sure does feel like it's been the longest offseason, Andy. I can remember being on the jet home from Dallas, from the Cotton Bowl, which was just a disaster. Ohio State really doesn't even view that as the end of last season. So when you put it that way, it feels like the end of last season was in November. And so it makes the offseason even longer because the Buckeyes basically got to work immediately on that offseason. It includes transfers such as, but not limited to, Will Howard, new starting quarterback. We thought he would be the starter the day that he announced that he was coming to Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins, the running back. You've got Seth McLaughlin going to snap the ball into that backfield with those two. You've got Caleb Downs in the secondary. You've got a potential backup quarterback in Julian Saint, who's still battling with Devon Brown for that QB2 spot. Like, it's pretty remarkable the offseason that this team had, and now they kind of get to put it all together with the 11 guys who decided that the NFL could wait one more year. You add all of those things together with all the returners that really didn't have a choice to go to the NFL, and it really does look like a special concoction here of guys that can really make this a special season for Ohio State.
Yeah, you have 4 captains, but you could probably have 8, 10, go down the line of all the guys that returned, and you can make a case for why each of them should be a captain for this football team. You can even say why Will Howard should be a captain. I mean, seeing what he's done already to kind of take hold of this team, whether it's in the huddle where he's actually facing guys, and we can talk more about that as the show goes on and what kind of changes we might see with this season. But he's really stepped up as a leader of this team and kind of seized this opportunity of his final college season and trying to elevate his draft stock, but also, win a national championship, beat Michigan, win a Big Ten title.
Yeah, it's so fun to just think about all the steps that led us here to Saturday. Like, Ohio State wasn't even supposed to play Akron, and we all forget that, but it was supposed to be a season opener against Southern Miss, and that game got canceled. I think Southern Miss opens with one of the Southern schools. It makes a lot more sense for Ohio State to give $2 million or whatever it is to Akron instead of a school in the South and help fund that athletic department, I guess. So some changes were made. Ohio State was supposed to go out to Seattle and play out of conference Pac-12 opponent Washington. Well, guess what? Now that trip to Washington waits until 2025 because they're in the freaking league. So, so many things have led to this opener and have led to it being against Akron in particular. Just a wild offseason. And that the scheduling stuff happened a little bit before that, but the whole offseason just seems kind of crazy. But now we can put it all to rest, put it all to bed. Nobody cares about the supposed $20 million figure with the NIL. Nobody cares about how many guys could have went to the NFL because they just returned. So now they're just Ohio State Buckeyes still. Like, all of that chatter from the offseason, natty or bust, it's all in the rear view because we've got football, Andy. So I want to start the show by asking, what are you most excited to see on Saturday in the Horseshoe at 3:30?
Oh, man. I feel like there's so much that I'm excited to see. For one, I just want to see Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins go 1-2 or 2-1 or 1A, 1B. I don't know how you want to flip it, but I'm excited to see those two in the backfield together, see how they kind of split up the carries, see if we see any 22 personnel, the two backs back there together, maybe using one as a receiver, maybe both as running backs. I don't know. I'm really excited to see Chip Kelly in this offense get creative with personnel packages. Maybe we see 2, 3, 4 tight ends at once. Like, maybe I'm being overzealous with this, but I do think we are going to see some really creative packaging throughout the season from Chip Kelly, maybe a little bit less so in week 1 against a MAC opponent like Akron, but I'm super excited to see the wrinkles he adds to this offense and him as play caller too, because even we'll get some third down situations, maybe not as many fourth down situations where they're going to have to be big decisions, but still interested to see what they do on third and longs, where they feel comfortable with Will Howard in the offense at this point. I think I'm really curious, kind of honing in on this offense and seeing the little wrinkles and creativity that Chip Kelly can bring.
Well, since you said that, I'm going to go the other side of the ball, man. So good friend, Matt Parker, Lettermen Row's very own Matt Parker, was standing there. I think it was last week. We're talking to some Ohio State players at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Caleb Downs is speaking, and I walk up to Matt Parker, and I said, Matt, it's kind of crazy. Like, Caleb Downs is over there wearing Ohio State stuff. Like, isn't that just crazy to think about? All of the guys that they returned, and then they still were able to add Caleb Downs. Like, I'm so excited to see him in an Ohio State uniform, playing out there, flying around, hitting guys for the Buckeyes. Like, you just think back to the 2022 Michigan game and the disaster that day was, up to and including Caleb Downs being in the stands watching all of that unfold as Donovan Edwards runs through the Ohio State secondary. Like, he watched that happen. And then instead of flipping, not just because of that, but instead of flipping, he does end up going to Alabama. And then 1 year later, he ends up at Ohio State after, an insane 107 tackle season at Alabama. When I saw him at Alabama last year on TV, he just looked different. Even as a true freshman, it just looked different when number 2 was out there for the defense. If you put him in this system, and we've been talking about it all offseason, but putting him in this system makes things completely different. It changed everything for this defense. And so to finally see the product on the field, and Jack Sawyer said as much, the product that they're going to put out there. They really are taking, responsibility for what they're putting out on the field. And to have Caleb Downs in that secondary, I think that's what I'm most excited to see from this team. Even with, all of the offensive stuff, like you talked about, those wrinkles are going to be fun. But since you talked about the offense, I had to go with Caleb Downs.
Yeah, the defense should be historically great. I mean, that's the expectation. Jim Knowles said in year 3 of his defenses, but especially year 3 of this Ohio State defense, they're chasing perfection. And you look at last year, they allowed 11.2 points per game, and that was second in the country. They want to be first this year. They want to have a couple shutouts. Starting on Saturday against Akron, the few games last year where opponents scored 3 points, and we're even late in the Big Ten slate against Michigan State and Minnesota, they gave up 3 points each, and Jack Sawyer was very frank with us that pissed them off. They don't want to give up 3 points. They want to shut out. And so this defense wants to win games on its own if it has to. They actually believe that they should have won the Cotton Bowl 3-0. I mean, that's just the way the mentality is for Jim Knowles and this defense. They're very hard on themselves, and as they should be. The expectations are grand this year to win a national title and accomplish all of those goals. But as you said, Caleb Downs, I mean, field general is one term we hear. Center fielder is another one. I think the big one's just difference maker, and he could very well be the best player on this defense this year.
Yeah, the ability to move Sonny Styles into the linebacker room was only possible because of Caleb Downs coming to this team. The ability to do as much as you want with this front seven and be more aggressive is because they trust Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom in the secondary so much, as well as those corners. So it did change everything. Difference maker is probably the best word. If you're looking for one word, I guess that's cheating because it would be hyphenated, but I guess you could still say one word or 1.5 words to describe him. It's just difference maker. Because in the offseason, he made the difference to be able to, move the pieces around that you needed. Now you get to see him, with all those pieces working. I'll give you a number 2 here. What else? What's on your brain, Andy? What else are you just really excited to see? We'll get the freshmen after this. I promise, folks. We will talk about which freshmen we're excited to see, but I'm going to give Andy another chance to give another thing that he's really excited to see.
Yeah, I feel like this could be the entire show, just going down the list of everything we're excited to see. I think for me, Jeremiah Smith is going to be in that freshman category, but it's on everyone's minds. We're going to see him finally get to play a real game for Ohio State. We've already seen him break the internet multiple times in Ohio State practice, whether it was mossing Jermaine Matthews in spring practice or beating Denzel Burke downfield in Student Appreciation Day, or going back and forth with Davison Igbinosun in training camp, being an Iron Buckeye, losing his black stripe after only 4 practices. All of these achievements, now he's in position to potentially start, and whether or not he's out there for the first play, it's very clear he's going to be out there at some point in the beginning of the game, making an immediate impact, probably playing starter level snaps. It feels like he's in that top 3 for the wide receivers, which means they'll all play along with Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka. So how could you not say Jeremiah Smith, JJ Smith, whatever you want to call him, freshman phenom, because that's what everyone's thinking about right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I think it's time to just stop thinking of him as a freshman. Like, he's not redshirting. He's not a true freshman in the sense of he's going to have some learning, curve, some growing pains. Like, he's not a freshman. And so when we talk about freshmen, we've all offseason had to couch it with, well, without talking about Jeremiah, who do you want to see as a freshman? So I think that at this point, you win this category because, you were the one who finally didn't even declare him a freshman here. It's just he's just something we want to see. He's not one of the freshmen we want to see. He's one of the Buckeyes we want to see. I think that's huge. But I'm going to go with another wide receiver, but it's not going to be a wide receiver. Ryan Day today declared a guarantee, just as some fun. I think this is Ryan being loose, being fun, knowing what he's got, the cards that he's holding. I think he's got pocket aces here this season. So, he can kind of, flex a little bit at the table. He guaranteed a punt or a kick return for a touchdown. Now, Jaden Ballard's going to return kicks, and just with kickoff rules, I just don't see that being the case. Kickoffs are hard to return, but punt returns, Andy, and you know where I'm going with this because it's my guy. Punt returns are a different story. There's going to be 2 guys handling the punt returns, but Ryan Day said it's going to be by committee. Brandon Innes from Lettermen Row sources. Lettermen Row sources have indicated Brandon Innes will probably take the first kickoff. Will take the first punt. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes one back to the house very early in this season. I really want to see what this punt return operation does. Ryan Day took a lot of pride under his own belt in getting special teams figured out. When I tell you that he heard all the criticisms, I can't say for sure that he heard fans on Twitter yelling about the special teams from last year, but he fired the special teams coordinator and put it under his own wing. You don't just do that without, really taking responsibility for it. He understands that it wasn't good enough last year. I think they're going to have something cooked up in the punt return game early in the season. I think they're going to try to get to the end zone in this regard. I'm really excited to see Brandon Innes with the ball in his hands in the return game.
Well, talk about by committee. That's special teams because Ryan Day might be at the head of it, but you got Rob Keys, who's the point man, kind of leading everything in all the directions there. You have who works with a specialist as well. You also have assistants like Matt Guerreri and Tim Walton and James Laurinaitis and Keenan Bailey, who are hands-on with a specialist. So it's just this whole committee approach. And I think it's actually really fascinating because you got all these position coaches involved. It helps them get to know more guys on the team. It also helps Ryan Day coach some of these defensive players that he's maybe not as acquainted with as, the offensive play caller in years past. Now he's actually seeing some of these defensive players, which factors in. I mean, that's what he says. You cut your teeth on special teams, and how many defensive guys have we seen start on special teams and then make some plays there and then get actual playing time on the defensive side of the ball? Jermaine Matthews, of course, last season was the best case of that kind of example of playing really well on special teams. And then when Denzel Burke goes down against Purdue in week 7, well, hey, there it is. Jermaine Matthews, the first one to come out. So special teams is really fascinating to me. It always is. I know we joke about that, but I think especially this year, without Parker Fleming or without a special teams coordinator in general, just having this by committee approach is really cool.
It's also interesting, Andy, that Ryan Day so many times this offseason has talked about, and the guarantee of a kick or a punt return for this season at some point this season. That's fun to talk about. But Ryan Day has talked so much this offseason about the no talent issues. And I've heard a couple of players say no talent issues. It's rubbed off onto the guys. We have all the talent. Ohio State understands how much talent is on the roster. Special teams is really a no talent issue. Take pride in your special teams or don't. And there are bad college football teams that are really good at special teams. And there are great college football teams that are terrible at special teams. So, like, it's a no-talent thing. If you want to be a no-talent, hardworking football team, a no-talent issue, hardworking football team, be good at special teams. And I think that's important. So, if they're going to emphasize those no-talent issues, I think special teams needs to be a part of that. We got a question here. I think I'd love to answer it because it does segue into freshmen to watch. If the game is a blowout, and it should be, which I agree, how many QBs get reps in the second half? Brown and Sam for sure, but do Lincoln and Air get any reps? Andy, I'm going to go 4, but I'd love to get your answer, then we can break it down.
Yeah, I'd say 4 quarterbacks. I don't think you need to have both freshmen getting reps. I mean, look at last year. Lincoln Kienholz was a freshman and didn't really get any reps until later in the season. I think Michigan State was the first game that we saw Lincoln Kienholz play in, and that's when they only had 4 quarterbacks, not 5. And Tristan Gebbia was kind of a quasi quarterback, if you will, on the roster. So I think with 5 actual scholarship quarterbacks, you probably wouldn't expect to see more than 4. And 4 is the high end of that. I mean, I think 3 is maybe most reasonable for Saturday's game. But yeah, maybe Lincoln is in the mix there as well. And that's going to be interesting to see play out because they need those reps. I mean, how many times did we say last year, well, if Lincoln Kienholz had gotten in maybe earlier in the season, maybe it wouldn't have been such a panic button mode for Lincoln in the Cotton Bowl. He was kind of thrown into the fire. You can't blame him. He just didn't have reps. So I think Ryan Day and the entire staff knows how important that is, especially at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I will go I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to go 3. Here's the deal. Will Howard needs reps with the ones in real game action, even if it's a blowout really early. I think he's going to play almost the entire first half. Devon Brown needs reps in case something happens to the very durable but also very mobile Will Howard. Got to have your backup quarterback ready, and Devon right now is the backup quarterback. And then Ohio State knows damn well that it has Julian Sayin, like the very, very talented, impress them from day one true freshman. He needs reps as well, like needs them more than even Devon and Will do. I don't know if there's room in the second half for Lincoln and Air to play. And I'll just say I don't know if there's room for Lincoln to play. I don't think we will see Air Nolan because, first of all, he hasn't lost his black stripe yet. That's a big deal when it comes to playing time. It just is. But, Lincoln, it would be up in the air, but I think we will see Julian Sayin and Devon Brown as long as the Ohio State takes care of business, which if they don't take care of business, they've got much bigger issues than, how many quarterbacks are getting reps. So, yeah, I'll backtrack a little bit. I'll go 3. And I think they'll let Julian Sayin run things for the fourth quarter.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it could only be 2. Who knows? Maybe they just give Devon Brown all those reps and say, hey, we'll wait for Julian until next week and kind of see how that goes. Maybe they would give Julian the second half or whatever against Western Michigan and have that evaluated that way if they want to continue the quarterback 2 competition in a way like that. But as you said, right now, Devon Brown is quarterback 2, so I think it's extremely important. He gets more reps. He only has 28 career pass attempts at this point. They just need more series on series on series for him to actually have that experience. So like you said, if something did happen in game or long term to Will Howard and they had to turn in Devon Brown, he could be the guy.
Let's go into what we were about to transition into, and that's freshmen to watch. We obviously just talked about Julian Sayin. We don't expect to see Aaron Nolan taking any snaps on Saturday. So those 2 kind of off limits at this point, Andy. And I know it's sad. You wrote a very good long feature story. If you haven't looked at it, go to lettermenrow.com. Check out Andy's feature on Julian Sayin. But I'm going to make him off limits for you. Jeremiah Smith now off limits for you. Who's a freshman that you're looking forward to seeing? Because I think we're going to see a lot of them on Saturday.
Yeah, James Peoples. And I've said this last week when we went live. I think that James Peoples is someone that could have 5 touchdowns this year. Maybe he even has 5 touchdowns in the first month of the year, just given the schedule and the amount he'll probably be playing in the second halves of these games. They want to make sure that Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are fully healthy for the games that really matter down the stretch. And I wouldn't be surprised if James Peoples racks up a lot of carries in this offense. And Travion Henderson was talking about him the other day. It said that, he reminds him of him a little bit, the way he kind of hit the ground running his freshman year, the way he runs the football, and also kind of just his mentality with the ball in his hands. And I think James Peoples is very mature beyond his years. When we've talked to him, he also just looks mature, like physically. I think even in the Cotton Bowl, when we saw him, it looked like he could have been on the team at that point. So I think this is a guy that could hit the ground running and score quite honestly, pretty frequently for Ohio State, maybe just in the early part of the schedule. But when you got those games against those non-con opponents, you want to make the most of them as a freshman.
So last week when we talked about some freshmen, I went with Jalen McClain. And I've talked about Jalen McClain quite a bit. And so I'm going to try to veer in a different direction. If you want, go back and watch last week's. It was a schedule preview. It was a season-long preview. I thought we did a good job covering a lot of bases there with freshmen to watch, players to watch, some under-the-radar breakouts, tricky games. I thought it was a good show last week. Go check that out if you haven't yet, over on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. I'm going in a completely different direction here. I'm going to go way out in left field. But I think that it's a guy who, as long as they're taking care of business, is going to get a little bit of playing time. I would love to see him, just to see what Ohio State is working with from a very raw talent standpoint in potential for first game action. You're not even going to see this coming, Andy. I'm going to go with Ian Moore, the tackle. Bumped up into the 2-3 range when they were down a lot of offensive linemen. And Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, said that he looked like he belonged out there when he was bumped up the depth chart, when they were missing guys with that funky virus that Ryan Day talked about. Didn't look out of place. Okay, well, if you don't look out of place against the 2s and the 3s at Ohio State, you really shouldn't look out of place against Akron. How are you on your pass drops? Because I think they're going to allow, or your pass sets. I think they're going to allow Julian Sand to throw the ball if he's in there with the 2s or the 3s. If Ian Moore gets a chance, I want to see how he is with that kick step, his pass blocking. I want to see what he's like as a road grader. We saw him last year. A little bit of mixed reviews. It was a mixed bag when we saw him as a road grader on the offensive line in high school. How is he doing? Where is he at as a baseline level to start his career? Because guess what? They're probably going to lose 2 tackles after this year. Guess what that means? There's going to be competition at either 1 tackle with a transfer coming in, or 2 tackles, or you're going to have to bring 2 transfers in. So it's a chance for him to show very early in his career, like, hey, don't forget about me. Yeah, it's against Akron's 2s, but I look pretty good and comfortable here in my first game action. I don't know, man. Like, I'm trying to dig deeper because we've been talking about this for 9 months, but it's a guy that I really am curious to see what he's like. What do you got, kid?
Yeah, I mean, he lost his black stripe already, so that's definitely noteworthy. And I do think the tackle position, as far as the backups go, is pretty interesting because it seems like Zem Mahalski and George Fitzpatrick have been coming along, and Justin Fry said they're playing kind of their best football right now that he's seen them play. So it would be really fascinating if Ian Moore was to jump one of those guys and get in with the 2s. But, I think that they're kind of maybe in front of him right now, but that's not to say that Ian won't play week 1 in this game. But I do think that tackle depth is really interesting. Austin Saraveld's another guy that they've started to play at both guard and tackle. He was mainly playing left guard behind Donovan Jackson and kind of feels like the success. But they've also played him at tackle, and I wonder, is he with the second team at tackle? Maybe do we see that? Who's the Bison, in the package? Is that package still going to exist with Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator? We always kind of key in on that position because it feels like maybe that's the next O-lineman up. In the Cotton Bowl was Tegra Shabola, who's now starting at right guard. At the beginning of last season was Luke Montgomery, who really had a great first impression on the Ohio State staff when he came in, is now working at other positions, center, guard still a little bit. So I've always kind of keyed in on the Bison tackle position, that extra tackle. I don't know if that's still going to exist, but if it does, it's always going to be interesting to see who is the Bison tackle week 1.
Yeah, it's great question. I don't know if will we have a Bison package. Just Chip Kelly, great question, because that 6th offensive lineman and the first offensive lineman on the field after the starting 5 has typically been the guy who the next year we're talking about as a starter.
Josh Fryer, remember?
Absolutely. Yep. And Luke Montgomery was in a starting battle this year, up until, training camp. So, and he was the first guy on the field as a 6th man last year. So it can happen. And you can make that leap from that 6th offensive lineman into the starting lineup. Like, that's in a game like this against Akron, like, you're looking for anything that could be interesting because you think that it's going to be a blowout with the 1s. This is actually a great question. I really want to get to it because I thought of an answer that I want to get your take on. What units will be the best and the worst on Saturday? The best, I'm going to go ahead and go defensive line. I'm not confident in this Akron offensive line, which we will get to at some point here in just a minute. The worst, I'm actually going to go. I think I'm going to go quarterback, but only because the new helmet comes and the potential that a true freshman plays for a lot of the second half. It might just not look like beautiful, whereas like the running backs probably going to have big lanes to run through. The receivers, they're going to be wide open. But like, like new helmet comes, if I'm grading on a scale, I guess I would go quarterback, but I don't see any unit on the defense. And then the offense, if there's one unit that I would say like, we still would want to see something more, it's probably going to be from Will Howard and the quarterbacks because I don't know how much time they're going to get to play anyway. So yeah, I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I would say best for me is probably going to be the defensive backs, just because I think they're the best unit on the team. And I think they'll show up week one, and I think we'll see a lot of them. Like, it's not just going to be Denzel Burke and Davis McMinosin and Jordan Hancock. Like, I think Jermaine Matthews will be good. Maybe we'll see some Aaron Scott. Like maybe we'll see Calvin Simpson-Hunt make a play or two like he did in the spring game. So I think that's going to be really fun to watch with those defensive backs. Ben Finley is the starting quarterback for Akron, has a career 7-9 touchdown to interception ratio. I've said this before this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Ohio State secondary picks off Ben Finley once or twice in this game, so they can kind of flash in that category for the worst unit on the team. And again, as you said, it's just like relatively, I don't think any unit's going to play particularly bad. I think for me, I would probably say like I'm still watching the offensive line. And, I think that with this defensive front for Akron, I've also talked about this week, but I think that's probably Akron's best position group right now. CJ Nunnally is one of the best returning pass rushers in the MAC. He had 7 sacks last year, forced a fumble. They brought in a defensive tackle from UNH, Nathan Kapongo, 6'4", big body guy. Bennett Adler's another defensive tackle they had who had a couple sacks last year. And, when you look at this group for that Akron defensive line, it's actually pretty good as far as MAC goes. And so I'd be wondering how this Ohio State offensive line is going to do. Like, are they going to have a clean sheet with no procedural penalties and no sacks given up and maybe just 1 or 2 TFLs allowed? I think that would be a great performance for Ohio State. I think anything less would probably put them more in that category towards the lower half as far as the grading out goes. So I'm probably going to go with that. I know it's not like offensive line hate. It's just offensive line caution, I think, for me, because until they prove it with this new group, I think that's definitely reasonable to say.
Which kind of takes me into what I was about to talk about next. I don't mean to push you to the side, Andy, but I was going to ask you what kind of challenge Akron presents. And there you go, laying out that Akron defensive line for us. I think that's probably where you would say, correct, where you think the challenge lies for Ohio State?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's not going to be a wholesale challenge. Like, I don't expect this defensive line from Akron to dominate in any way, but are there going to be those cracks from the offensive line? And I think for Ohio State fans, you don't want to see any cracks on Saturday from the Ohio State offensive line, given what we saw in the Cotton Bowl and given what we saw a lot of last season, which was just up and down play from that O-line unit. I think having a sound, not perfect, but close to perfect game from the offensive front is what you're looking for with Justin Fry in this unit and Chip Kelly trying to, make this group stronger than it was before.
Yeah. Well, the last time Ohio State did not give up a sack in a game was in 2022. They gave up a sack in every game last year, including Youngstown State. Yes, the Penguins, the Gwens got in the backfield against the Buckeyes. Like, not good enough. So go in. Don't let this, dare I say, decent Akron defensive line, decent by MAC standards, certainly. The Nunnally kid I do really like. I think he's a good player. And then, like you said, the UNH transfer, like, that's a guy who's pretty good. So, for the standards of UNH. So go be good is all I'm saying for Ohio State. Go be good. I'm going to go with the Ohio State run defense. It was 29th nationally last year, 26th against the run the year before. They gave up fewer yards last year, but there were just 28 run defenses better. So They gave up fewer yards than in 2022, but they got worse nationally, which is kind of weird, but just a gray area there. Anyway, the Akron run game is surprisingly like patched together with some former talents. They've got a Minnesota transfer and a Michigan State transfer toting the rock for them. They've got transfers. They've got starters returning at 2 different spots on the offensive line. That'd be at center and then at one of the guard spots. And then they've got a Florida transfer, a UConn transfer who started at Alabama, and a Miami, Florida transfer. So guys that have trickled down to the MAC, but did start at a place where, hey, we think you can play at Alabama. Hey, you're good enough to play at Florida. You're good enough to get recruited down to Miami, Florida. Like former talents who, hey, you get one chance when you play for Akron to prove yourself against the best, maybe the best defense in the country. Those guys, like, yes, they play for Akron. They all have NFL aspirations. So they're going to want to put something on tape against the JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Kenyatta Jackson, and Tyleek Williams that shows like, hey, Chargers, hey, Steelers, hey, Cardinals, I can block these guys. You should, undrafted free agent me at the end of this year. You should pick me in the 7th round. Like, I'm just saying, like, those guys have their chance on Saturday. And so Ohio State needs to have a very good performance against the run. Because if there's one thing I think Akron will try to do to Ohio State, it's run the football. They're definitely not going to try to drop Ben Finley back and throw against this pass rush into this secondary. So what are they going to try to do? Run the football. Stop the run, Ohio State. Stop the run. I just want to see like a dominant performance against the run.
Yeah, well, they might have to throw if they can't run.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think it's worth noting that, as you've said before, that, with a team like this that just kind of wants to get out of week 1 healthy, like Akron doesn't want to mortgage its entire season based off this one matchup with Ohio State. Like, it is worth noting that they might run the football just to get out of there quickly, just to speed the game up a little bit. I think that's definitely a valid point. So I agree with you. I think the run defense kind of got, overshadowed a little bit last year as far as maybe there were more concerns about it. Like that Rutgers game, I think those concerns really started to sprout in that one, where I know Kyle Mononga is one of the better running backs in the Big Ten and even nationally, but there were too many times where it felt like Ohio State couldn't really get a stop where it needed to. The drives were just too long. It was more of that bend, don't break. I feel like this year the Ohio State defense is supposed to be more aggressive. So that's another thing to watch out for. Like, are they scheming up more blitzes? Is Jim Knowles going to be the schematic wizard we all heard about when, he came over from Oklahoma State, and we saw a little bit more of that in 2022 than we did in 2023. Will they play generally a little bit less safe, but still sound enough not to give up those big plays?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of the situation here with Jim Knowles. Andy, before we go any further, I've gotta ask, because I know you've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them, Andy, covered in sauce? I know you haven't, because you told us, but you've got to go get them, Andy, because Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, and they turn them all the way up to 11. Choose between flavors such as buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker like Gary Williams in the chat is, then you got to go with the spicy ghost pepper on the Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you, Gary. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Gary is one of my favorite people. He's a Michigan troll who's in the comments, but as long as he watches long enough to get that ad into the video, I don't care if he's watching. So I'm not going to ban him. That's not going to happen. Why would I ban Gary? We like that. We like the chatter in the comments. If you do have a question, leave it down in the comments. We'll try to get to it as soon as we can. But, Andy, this brings us to the Wendy's Saucy Nug of the Week. The Wendy's Saucy Nug of the Week. We're just going to give a saucy nugget, and I've got one for you. Then you've got to give me maybe something that could classify as a saucy nugget, but I've got one that's pretty crazy. So, Ohio State has not lost to an in-state opponent since, do you know since when, Andy? I'm sure you might, because you've probably looked it up.
I feel like I overheard you saying it. It's the Grover Cleveland stat.
Yeah, it's the Grover Cleveland stat.
Yeah.
So Ohio State hasn't lost to an in-state opponent since 1894. not quite Grover's first term in office, but his second term in office, because he got voted out, then voted back in 4 years later. So Grover's second term in office, Buchtel College Ohio State goes up to Buchtel College, plays against what is now known as Akron, and loses 12-6. Ryan Day was asked this week if he had reminded his team, don't forget 1894, don't forget the 12-6 loss to Buchtel College. And Ryan Day said no, he had not told his team about that. That's my saucy nug of the week. I don't have much else. Akron has won 7 games in 5 years. It's not a good football program. It's not a good team. They do have a brand new stadium, which is really nice, but they finished 11th in the MAC. So there's no better week to look back on the 1894 college football season than when Ohio State and Akron kick off in the Horseshoe. So that's my Wendy's saucy nug of the week.
That's a good one, man. How do you even start looking that up? Do you just go back? Do you go all the way through Sports Reference, all the way back to 1800s era, or what do you even do to start to find that?
You see it in like a game note, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting, but like that can't be real, right? And then you start looking at the record against like all the in-state opponents, and the times that Ohio State played like Denison, Ohio State played, Wittenberg and some of these schools. Ohio State's playing the plumbers and pipe fitters of Delaware County, and it's like back in the 1800s, it's like, oh man, they haven't lost since 1894. The media guide from Jerry Emig was correct. That's crazy. But yeah, it is fun to look back on, and then obviously history nut. I've got to dive into the Grover Cleveland presidency. I think that ended in an economic disaster, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that this is a game where like it's back-to-back MAC opponents, which, as you said, wasn't the intended schedule. Like it wasn't supposed to be that way. But hey, you must be happy. The OU grad over there gets to relish in his old conference that he used to be part of, if you will, and covered certainly.
Yeah, I mean, next year the Bobcats are coming to the Horseshoe, and I think my head's going to explode. But that's neither here nor there. Andy, it is Akron week. It is the season opener. And I didn't even say that I was going to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you now. You've been covering this team for a couple years now. What did you miss about Ohio State football? Whether that's seeing Script Ohio or, walking through the tailgates on the way in 3.5 hours early when we get to the stadium, or, being on the field when Carmen, Ohio strikes up, or, whatever it is, or if it's, watching the crowd go nuts for touchdowns, like what did you miss about Ohio State football? And I want the people watching this video to make sure to put down in the comments what they missed about Ohio State football. I'll put some up on the screen if it's good enough.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I think it's first worth noting that Archie Griffin's going to be dotting the I this week, which is super special. And he just had the Heisman statue unveiled in the Rose Bowl, I think, earlier this month, and he's got ceremonies throughout this week at Ohio State honoring him, and I think that's super special. The 50th anniversary, I think that's super cool. So that's worth noting for fans that might not be aware of that happening. The dotting the I is cool. For me, I think it's just seeing the sheer number of people that are there at an ungodly hour. Like we are there early, but there are people who are there even earlier, and like you show up and you feel like you're late, but it's only 8 a.m. for a noon kick. This case, it's 3:30 kick. I'll probably try to get there, 11 a.m.-ish range. And I'm sure there are going to be people there at least around the bars or High Street area or somewhere in the short north. They're going to be up drinking at like 6, 7. I mean, that's just the way it is. And even families just doing things that have nothing to do with that stuff and just gathering for the game. I think that's the coolest thing. Like the spring game having 80,000 people, I think speaks to the culture of Ohio State football and the fandom that is in Columbus. I think that never gets old for me. Someone that didn't grow up in Ohio, seeing that every time is always kind of this like humbling thing that, okay, we're all just small pieces of this big thing that is so much bigger than even Columbus. It's the entire state. And I think that's always a reminder.
That's a good one. It's very sentimental, Andy. That was very nice of you to say things about Ohio as a non-Ohioan. As an Ohioan, I think there's the things that I missed the most during the offseason that I just like yearn for in like the middle of May. It's Script Ohio before the game, and I think Script Ohio is going to just be like to be there when Archie dots the I think is going to be just electric. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be awesome. It'll be a moment that the 105,000 people or however many there are on Saturday. We'll just not forget. So I think it's going to be emotional for Archie. I think it's going to be emotional for a lot of people in the stadium who, are starting to get older and remember watching Archie. And to see him dot the I, like anybody dotting the I think it's just an absolute honor. And I think it's a really cool tradition. But, to see Archie do it is going to be just super cool. And then as an Ohioan, again, it's hang on Sloopy, right? At the end of the third quarter, they fire that up. Like Ryan Day talks about, sometimes he takes off that headset and tries to listen to hang on Sloopy while he's coaching because he wants to be able to understand the magnitude of what he's doing. Like that to me, like he understands it and he's, been, I guess, baptized into the traditions at Ohio State. And like, if it means that much to the head coach, like I try to take a minute when that plays and like see the crowd react to it and everything, especially when it's a big game and like everybody's still there. I think that is a moment that like, you just kind of don't forget those things. And while it's week one and we'll be right into it after this, I wanted to get your thoughts on like, hey, what did you miss? Like we spent so much time talking about the actual game, but like, we're people too. Like what'd you miss about Ohio State football that we haven't seen in like 8 or 9 months?
Yeah. The press box food, not, I mean, I guess like the later the game, the better the food that we get, just for the fans watching, which is good. But I think it's something to miss. Just the aura of everything, even the media areas there, seeing the people that work for the broadcast team, seeing the people that work the redcoats, like it's a whole community of people that are working in the stadium to make everything work. And I think that you kind of go away from December to now really, and then you see them all again and it feels like it's been no time at all. So I think that's always cool too.
The guy who checks the passes in AA deck, who sits in the chair and lets you go down the field, like that guy's great. Larry, the leader of the Redcoats, who's up in the press box checking those things, like checking the credentials, like the people around it. It's really cool. Yeah. But we'll move on from a little bit of sentiment. We won't do that every week, but I just figured it's a good time to talk about it. Andy, we'll do this just for this week, but I want to make sure that we save our score predictions most week for Friday when we do staff picks on lettermenrow.com. But this week, like it's Akron. I want to get your thoughts on like why you think that this game is going to be the way that it is. What do you got? What's your score prediction?
Yeah, I'm down to 63-3 with an Ohio State win, and I think that look, this offense needs to get going from the jump. It wasn't where it needed to be last year. It was, really towards the bottom top third of college football last year, which is just surprising. I mean, you just don't see that from a Ryan Day offense, and I think he knew that something needed to change, actually more than one change, and that's why you saw the staff changes that he made. You saw him take a step back from play calling. You saw him bring in a new quarterback, and all these different things came into play to make this offense really go. And I mean, like, score 40-plus points a game again, because that's what the Ohio State offense is supposed to be. We did not see that last year. I think it's going to be very important for Ohio State to score fast, often, and a lot on Saturday. And I think, I'm even predicting for my bowl prediction, not to give that away too, but I think that they'll have 6 touchdowns by halftime. And I think that's going to be what they need. And I think that they're going to have that 40 spot by halftime. I just don't think this Akron defense is where you need to be to contend with Ohio State. Now it might be okay in the MAC, who knows? Like, they were actually decent last year defensively. But I think against Ohio State, I mean, they're just overmatched. So I think this Ohio State offense will hit the ground running.
I think they had a top 50 defense last year, maybe even top 40, which, something to hang your hat on, especially when you got an offensive head coach in Joe Moorhead. Like, he's trying to build this thing up. I've tried really hard this week, like, to not, especially because it's the MAC. Like, respect the MAC. Okay. I pay a lot of money still, and I'm going to for the next, like, how many years to a MAC school. I'm not going to disparage my beautiful conference that plays ridiculously cold November night games. I've tried really hard not to disparage Akron this week. It's been a little difficult at times just because, like, you're not comparing them to Ohio and Central Michigan right now. You're comparing them to Ohio State. And so, like, it's been a little tough to talk about them in a serious sense. And next week we'll struggle with the same thing with Western Michigan, but that's just the way it is. Like, you're getting your $2 million, get back up the highway and go play a MAC schedule after this. I've got 52-3. Man, shutouts are hard. They are. We both predict no shutout. They're just not easy to come by. And like last year, You think you're going to shut out Michigan State, they kick a really long field goal. You think you're going to shut out Minnesota, and you really should have shut out Minnesota, you get a really long field goal. Indiana kicks a field goal on you and gets your shutout ruined. Even Western Kentucky last year had 10, and I think they scored a touchdown in the first half. It was like 10-7. It's just not easy, and so I'm going 52-3, which doesn't even cover. But yeah, it's like that's just what it is. Like it's hard to shut teams out, even a team like Akron that's projected to finish 11th in the MAC. Like there's some FCS schools playing like SEC schools or Big 12 schools this week that will score like 3 points. That will score the phantom random fourth quarter touchdown. So yeah, it's just what it is.
Yeah, but as we've talked about this week, like the measuring stick isn't the spread. It isn't, the other team necessarily. It's Ohio State, and like they want to leave no doubt every week, and that's been the mantra for this season. It's not just in the game against Michigan. It's not just when they go to Oregon on October 12th. It's not, in the Big Ten championship game if they get there. It's every game of this year. They want to just really dominate, and I think that starts on Saturday. We're both predicting that kind of dominance, but I think, really you're kind of almost rankings watch, even though it's not the BCS system, even though it's not a 14 playoff anymore. I feel like they're acting like it is, and I think that's a good thing. Like you're almost going for the style points because you want to send a message. Also, you want to send a message to yourself that you can be that dominant, especially offensively when they just quite honestly weren't. I mean, they scored 35 points against Youngstown State last year. I remember leaving that game feeling like fans were kind of mixed bag of opinions. It was like, well, yeah, they won and they should have. There was no way they weren't going to win, but they only scored 35, and most of that came in the first half. And so I feel like for fans to be totally satisfied, it's going to be a big time win. We're talking 55 plus points, 50 plus points, whatever you want to settle on. But that's got to be the standard, Spencer, because if you're not doing that, you can kind of get out of, in a bad habit, I guess, if not fully operating to your maximum potential on offense.
If you are down with the score prediction that Andy gave, I found a really cool prop, I guess you call it, on one of the sports books. I don't suggest anybody gamble. I don't try to encourage anybody to gamble. If you do, you can currently at a couple of the books get Ohio State to score a touchdown on its first drive and Akron to punt on its first drive, and it was like plus 110. And I was like, I don't bet on the Buckeyes, but I was like, that's interesting. Like if you expect Ohio State to get off to a quick start and you think Akron's just going to punt it away after a 3-and-out or something, like it's pretty interesting. Last thing, then we'll get to some games other than Ohio State Akron, the barn burner that we all know it's going to be. There's a couple other great, decent games, around college football. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Andy, last year in the opener, Indiana decided to go triple option on Ohio State. It did not work. It was terrible. But that's what they decided to do. They had 153 yards of total offense. 153. Do you think Akron, if I gave you, let's go 153.5 as the total, is Akron going over 153.5 total yards on Saturday, or are they going under 153.5 total yards on Saturday?
Under. Yeah. I mean, I think they'll probably end up with 120 something. And again, this is so not an Akron conversation. There, you can take nothing from that and be like, okay, this is what Akron's going to be this year. It's kind of just a write-off of okay, yeah, that was their week one game. I think this Ohio State defense is so good. It was already so good last year. I think it was just struggling maybe to find the balance between aggressive and conservative. It struck more on the conservative chord, which I think was a better spot to be in than the year before, where they were taking way too many chances. I think now it's kind of like that Goldilocks effect, trying to find the right fit. And, we'll see if they do that this year. I think that's kind of the magic word or calling card for Jim Knowles this year, is to find that balance and find that happy medium.
Yeah, I would go under as well. Just barely. Again, even if they're punting on most drives, a first down is probably going to happen, I would think. But then again, the 2019 Ohio State team got down, I think 5-0 to Miami, and then the final score was 76-5, and Miami didn't move the ball again after that. So that was bizarre. So something bizarre, I guess, could happen. But yeah.
Wait, I got one for you though.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
Do you think you're going to get a back-breaking Will Howard touchdown? Like he had last year a 70-yard run against Oklahoma State, and then you go back to 2021, he had a 71-yard run against Texas. In 2020, he had runs of 69 yards against Oklahoma State and 80 yards against TCU. Like, are we going to have one of those runs like we saw in training camp where he ran for 80 yards touchdown? Like, do you think that Will Howard has his Justin Fields moment? Remember, Justin Fields' first carry was a 51-yard zone read keep for a touchdown against FAU in 2019. Is Will Howard going to have his Justin Fields moment with a 50-plus yard touchdown run? Do we get that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think so. Maybe not 50 plus, but like 40 plus.
I just think that would be interesting. And I think he's totally capable of doing it. I mean, proof's in the pudding, right? The numbers are already there. But also, I think a lot of Ohio State fans haven't seen him kind of reach that max speed. And maybe you've gone back and watched the Kansas State games or tape or whatever. But seeing him kind of roll down the sideline like we did in training camp for that one where it was clear 80 yards and actually creating a little bit of distance, maybe just by momentum, but, running his max speed, which is 22 miles per hour. Like, I think that would be cool for Ohio State fans to see if that does happen on Saturday.
Yeah. I think it'd also be cool if he just chucked one deep to Jeremiah and let him go get one. But we'll see if that happens in Ohio State Akron. One last final thing on Akron. I don't know Akron's athletic director. I don't know who scheduled these games. Shame on you. Ohio State to start the season. Next week they go to Rutgers. Then sandwiched right after Rutgers. So they got 2 Big Ten teams open the year. Then they get to play Colgate, which is probably a win, but you're going to be so beat up after playing 2 physical Big Ten teams. You got to play Colgate at home. And then after that, you go to South Carolina. Like, how many checks do you need?
They're building something in there.
That's brutal, man.
They're building. That's a rebuild for you. They're building for the long haul, I guess. I don't know. They're trying to get in the NIL arms race, maybe.
They're building arts and sciences buildings on the back of football. That's crazy. 3 power conference opponents, 2 Big Ten and an SEC. You get 4 non-cons. Like, how's Joe Moorhead supposed to even attempt to make a bowl game when you're scheduling like that, man?
Well, look, they've won 4 games in the last 2 years. They're 4-20. But look, last year they lost 5 games by a touchdown or less, and 4 of them were by 3 points or fewer. So if Akron gets to 5 wins, like I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like the max slate, like maybe they'll win 3-4 games. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they're like as bad as some teams Ohio State could play. Like they're playing Southern Miss. Like I don't know. We might even be having a more extreme conversation about the score prediction.
Yeah. Well, they don't get a bye week until October 19th. Right after they go to South Carolina, they go to Ohio, to the Hornets' nest that is Peden Stadium. So watch out for that one, September 28th. Okay. And while we're on the subject, we're going to get out of here right at an hour. We got 7 more minutes of this program. If you're enjoying it, make sure you like the video below. Subscribe to the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. We're going to do this every Thursday at 6:30. It's a really good time. Andy, Clemson, number 14, Clemson, number 1, Georgia, in the Aflac kickoff game in the big Mercedes-Benz Stadium, one of my favorite places I've ever covered a game in. You got the dogs? You taking the cats?
Yeah, I'm going. I'm definitely in Georgia in this game. I will say, though, I do have Clemson making the college football playoff in my projection that we kind of put out for lettermenrow.com last week. So I think that Clemson will win the ACC. I do think they'll take a loss here. I do think it'll be more competitive and more entertaining than the last time we saw these 2 teams play, which was a 10-3 game in which DJ Uiagalelei threw 1 touchdown, but it was to the wrong team. And so I think we'll get a better game this time. I'm really actually excited for this game. I think that that's a great matchup for week 1.
I disagree. I don't think we're going to get a good game at all. I think Georgia is going to stomp Clemson. Okay, Penn State at West Virginia. That's a banger. Man, it's just a bang. Like, I can't wait for that game. Like, it's going to be awesome. Who you got?
Well, they did it last year, too.
Yeah, but this one's in Morgantown. Like, it's just different.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Burn the couches, man.
Penn State, though.
Yeah, I'll take Penn State. I'll take Penn State close.
Yeah.
Miami at Florida. Hey, man, look. Ooh. Hey, as somebody who, I'll just be honest with the fine people watching this program, I sweat a lot. I could not imagine being in Gainesville, Florida on August 31st at 3:30 with 100,000 people.
Yeah.
That sounds insane. hydrate. If you're going to that game and you're watching this video, first of all, what are you doing? Second of all, hydrate.
Weren't they having an issue with like a whiteout situation? Like they were trying. Yeah, I think it was like Florida was trying to do a whiteout, but like Miami's going to be wearing a white for the game, and it was just like already, what is going on? Both, like, by the way, Billy Napier needs a win in this game, and Mario Cristobal also really needs a win in this game. So prayers out to whoever loses this game. I'm going to go with Miami in this one, but
I'm going Florida. So this is fun, Andy. We disagree on everything. Maybe we'll disagree on more picks. Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Mike Elko, head coach at Texas A&M, used to be at Duke. Riley Leonard, now quarterback at Notre Dame, used to be at Duke. Something's got to give at Kyle Field on Saturday night.
I'm going Notre Dame. I feel like this is a game Notre Dame wins, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, Notre Dame! Like they're going to win a national championship." I think Notre Dame will win. I think there'll be overreactions afterwards, and we can all assess that after that.
Saw a lot this summer of Connor Wegman NFL draft buzz. He's going to be thrown into a really good Notre Dame secondary. I think he's going to look pretty decent. I'm going to take Texas A&M just because it's at home. If this was in South Bend, I would take Notre Dame, and I'd probably take them by double digits. But, man, like 110,000 cult members just screaming at you sounds really intimidating. And so, like, I'm going to go A&M. Like, I think it's just going to be really tough. Notre Dame could very well still make the college football playoff. I just think that it's going to be very, very difficult. Life is not going to be fun for Riley Leonard. And also, like, he's a good player. He had 3 touchdown passes last year. Like, I know he was hurt, but, like, the production just did not match, like, the hype, I guess. I like him a lot. I don't think I like him enough on the road with a really good pass rush from A&M, and also Notre Dame, I think I heard 6 starts among its 5 offensive linemen, starting a freshman tackle against a really, really good A&M defensive line that gets off the bus and scares people. Like, I'm going A&M, man. I don't know.
That's a good. I mean, I feel like that game and the Clemson Georgia game are the two that kind of catch my eye with this slate.
Yeah, if you have plans on Saturday, cancel them. Batten down the hatches. Get in front of a TV. Sunday night is maybe just as good because it's USC, LSU. For some reason, they're playing it in Las Vegas because they couldn't. I don't know, man. Like, put it in the Coliseum, put it in Death Valley. Just don't play it in some sterile NFL environment, you idiots. Anyway, it's in Las Vegas. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going with LSU. I feel like these two teams are kind of similar in the way where like the expectations are always going to be there, but you never really know until they play a game. I know that LSU, didn't they open last year against FSU and then lost that game? And that was kind of like set the tone for that season.
Maybe, yeah. Or it was 2022, one of the two, but yeah. I remember they lost the one on I remember they lost the 2022 game on an extra point that got blocked.
Yeah. Well, either way, this is a classic opening matchup for these kinds of programs. Yeah, I'm going to LSU. USC's got a tough start to the year, man. They got to go to Michigan later in September.
Yeah. Well, Michigan plays Fresno State. You think – that's actually – we'll pick that one real quick because we got to get out of here quick, and I still got one more game to bring up to you, and I got to bring one up. Does Michigan cover the 20.5 against Fresno State?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be like 31-10. That's a cover then. Jeez. Okay. Well, then I think, yeah. I can't math.
I don't think it'll be close.
Monday night. It's an isolation game. There's only one game on. All eyes are going to be on Chestnut Hill for Florida State at
Boston. Tallahassee.
It's in Tallahassee, even better. All eyes are going to be on Tallahassee for Boston College to walk in there and silence the tomahawk chop. Give me Boston College to cover the 16.5. They're not going to win, but they're going to cover.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, look, if they win as a BC alum, I'd be very happy, but I do not think they will win that game. You get an angry FSU. Sorry. If FSU had just eked out a win in Dublin last week against Georgia Tech, I think they'd be on upset alert. I just can't see them starting 0-2. That team's way too talented. They gotta let DJU throw the ball. I think that was way too limited with their offense last week.
And then the game that we've all been waiting on. Former Ohio State starting quarterback Kyle McCord and the Syracuse Orange take on the Ohio Bobcats at the Artist, formerly known as the Carrier Dome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think There should be a lot of eyes in this game.
Yeah, I'm not going to pick the game, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I think, look, Syracuse is going to win this game, but I'm really curious to watch Kyle play all season. Look, we both like Kyle as a guy. I think he was great with media last year. Just wasn't at the standard that Ohio State needed. Definitely was too inconsistent on those, big moments that you think about. Even the Notre Dame game could have been a pick here or there on that final drive. But I think he could flourish in the ACC. The defenses just aren't the same. So we'll be watching.
I will definitely be watching. Hopefully we have to sweat out maybe a Bobcats upset victory. They beat Iowa State last year. See if they can do it. Let's see if Ohio State can get off on the right foot against Akron. I think that I have an inkling that they will be able to, Andy, but if they don't, we'll obviously be covering it. Andy Backstrom is going to be in the Horseshoe on Saturday at 3:30 for Ohio State and Akron. I will be there as well. Tim May, the 41-year vet, he will be there as well. We're going to break it all down over at lettermenrow.com. Right now, if you go to lettermenrow.com, you use the promo code kickoff24, you get 50% off an entire year of Lettermen Row coverage. That's right. You get 50% off an annual membership to lettermenrow.com. Go use that promo code kickoff24. It only runs until Friday. You need to get that deal. If you don't already have it, or if you're not already a member over at Lettermen Row, go there now, get that. We're doing some really cool things over there, covering the Buckeyes in a unique way. We're doing a lot here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you guys back here on the YouTube channel for bold predictions tomorrow, where you get score predictions and bold predictions from Andy, myself, and Tim. Get a lot of recruiting coverage here on the YouTube channel. We'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com for all of that, and then we'll see you in the Horseshoe on Saturday at 3:30 for Ohio State and Akron in the season opener.